I burst into my brother's room and blurted out, "Charlie, you're gonna be my boyfriend!" He said I was crazy. We were brothers and sisters, but I immediately calmed him down. And I told him that all 11 years at school, I was considered a loser. But it was the last years of my studies, and I decided to prove that I was a cool girl and to win the love of the best guy in school, Dan. How many times have I tried to get Dan's attention? But all my attempts have failed. Everyone just laughed at me and said that Dan wouldn't fall for a nerd. And yesterday, I thought I saw Dan wink at me at school in the locker room. I realized here it was, my chance to change everything. But after hearing me out, my brother Charlie flatly refused to play my boyfriend. Oh, right? Then I said that if he did not help, I would tell our parents that I saw him doing something forbidden with the guys at the party. Charlie panicked and said he was just messing around. And I replied that if our parents found out, they would probably send him to a clinic for treatment. Then he would not have a sports career. He added that he did not expect such a vile blackmail from me. After that, Charlie sighed and asked what to do. The plan was this: I would catch Pretty Dan after school, and when we left school, Charlie would treat me with a bouquet. Dan would get jealous and finally fall in love with me, a trick I read about from a pickup coach. We don't look like brothers and sisters. You are a blue-eyed blonde, and I am a brunette with brown eyes. Charlie nodded curtly. After school, everything went as it should. I found Dan, and when we left school, Charlie was waiting for me with a gorgeous bouquet. I hugged my brother, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw how much Dan didn't like it. He was definitely jealous. It worked. Suddenly, a blonde girl came up to us, and Dan quickly left with her. What was that just now? Was she his girlfriend? I immediately told Charlie to follow them. Charlie said that he didn't like the guy and that he would go after him, just so I wouldn't be in any danger. Come on, you don't know him at all. We watched Dan and his blonde girl carefully, and at one point, they went into the park. The path gradually narrowed. We had to fall far behind to avoid being noticed. And Charlie was always stopping and showing me some leaves. After another leaf, I suddenly realized that I didn't see Dan. Damn, did we miss them? It's all because of you, Charlie. I was frantically trying to figure out how to find them when I suddenly saw a Ferris wheel nearby. Bingo! From this height, we'll find Dan quickly. The queue for the wheel was long and I was nervous. Charlie tried to calm me down and even brought me cotton candy. How did he know I loved it? Then it was our turn, and the controller offered to take binoculars. Of course, give me. It will be very useful. We started going up, and I looked through the binoculars for Dan, and Charlie kept saying it was a stupid idea. And then I finally saw Dan on one of the benches. He was having a nice chat with a blonde. We just need to go down there and eavesdrop on their conversation, but the wheel was moving so slowly. Suddenly, we rocked, and for a second, Charlie and I were so close that our lips almost touched. And for the first time, I saw his deep blue eyes so close. Wow. But I immediately pulled away from him. There was an awkward silence in the air. When we finally got down, I noticed that Charlie looked sad. I pretended that nothing had happened and said that we needed to get to Dan faster. I hoped he was still sitting on that bench. We made our way to them and crouched in the bushes behind them, where we could hear the conversation clearly. At first, they were talking about all sorts of nonsense, but suddenly my name was mentioned in the conversation. I was glad that Dan was thinking of me. But he only laughed at this masquerade with flowers. He didn't believe Charlie was my boyfriend. I was annoyed that my plan had failed. And then Charlie began to pull me aside. Charlie, what's this for? Looking down, I noticed a snake near my leg. Charlie caught himself and threw it back with a branch, but Dan had already got up from the bench and was walking towards the bushes. He heard my cry. Charlie suddenly howled like a huge dog. Dan immediately recoiled, and he and the blonde hurried away. Thank you, Charlie. As soon as we got home, I locked myself in my room and spent half the night coming up with a new plan. But I kept thinking about the moment on the wheel. I couldn't think of anything but Charlie's deep blue eyes. We almost kissed. And then I got an idea. We could kiss in front of Dan. A fake kiss, of course. I went out to breakfast and, as if nothing had happened, told Charlie about it. He almost choked and refused to participate. But I immediately reminded him that there was something I could tell our parents. Charlie and I arrived at school earlier and were standing in the school parking lot on purpose. I was worried and kept looking over my shoulder to make sure I didn't miss Dan. And now, at last, he arrived. I wrapped my arms around Charlie's neck and wanted to turn my back on Dan so he wouldn't notice our fake kiss. But Charlie suddenly kissed me for real. Charlie, what are you doing? I tried to pull away, and then I noticed over my shoulder that Dan was walking toward me. Ignoring Charlie and her kiss, Dan took my hand and invited me to the party. Oh my god! Did it really work? And then Charlie suddenly said that I wasn't going anywhere. No, I said. I'm coming to this party! Then Dan and Charlie exchanged an unfriendly look, after which Dan nodded and left. I immediately snapped at Charlie. What are you doing? Why did you really kiss me? Charlie deadpanned that he just wanted to help. Then make things realistic. Then I thanked Charlie coldly and told him that his help was no longer needed. I turned around and went home. The party was already today, and I needed a cool look. As I picked up my dresses, I banished the thought that my first kiss in life had happened to my brother. And then Charlie came into the room. He was about to say something, but when he saw me, he stopped in mid-sentence, and then he said with a delight that I was stunning. I felt myself blush, turned away, and firmly stated that I was in a hurry, and quickly left. I was looking forward to a great evening with Dan, but he immediately disappeared somewhere, and I was left alone. Everyone was having fun, and I was very lonely. I thought Charlie would support me now, but I stopped myself. At that moment, Dan came up and said that he had a surprise. Before I could answer, Dan pulled me along. Everyone parted, and then I was standing in the center of the room. Dan asked me to close my eyes, and suddenly something nasty was poured on my head. I looked up and there was a bucket of slop hanging from the ceiling. Everyone burst out laughing. Dan, why are you doing this? At that moment, he threw a glass of juice at me and said that no one liked such crazy nerds, much less him. Then Dan added that I was trying to make him jealous by kissing my brother. He was onto us from the start. Boo! The cheerleaders immediately boomed. You're just a jerk and she's the best girl on earth. I heard a familiar voice. Charlie? But what was he doing here? Charlie said quietly that he didn't like Dan right away. He was worried and decided to check on me. I pushed everyone aside and ran out into the street, with Charlie running after me. I was choking on tears. I embarrassed myself in front of the whole school. Charlie tried to calm me down and told me that Dan wasn't just worthy of me. Through my tears, I asked, and who is worthy, Dan? And then Charlie came right up to me and told me that he had been in love with me since childhood and no longer wanted to hide his feelings. That's why he took up sports, to try to drown out his feelings. It helped for a long time, but the incident on the Ferris wheel reminded him of everything. I couldn't believe it. Charlie, are you sick? You're my brother. I staggered away from him and ran away. My mind was all mixed up. He was my brother. We needed to stay away from each other. I didn't want to see Charlie, and I didn't want to be around him. And then I remembered about something forbidden. I ran home. My parents were shocked by my appearance and began to ask what happened. But I blurted out everything to Dad about the party where Charlie was using some illicit drug. I said that he needed urgent treatment and that they should take him to the clinic. Dad was furious, and at that moment, Charlie ran home, out of breath. Dad told me to go to my room and ordered Charlie to sit down at the table. I was hurt and ashamed. It seemed like I'd made a terrible mistake. I couldn't sleep all night. One minute, I wanted to go into Charlie's room and hug him. The next, I wanted him out of my life. The next morning, I woke up to a loud slam of the door. I ran to the window. Charlie was walking to the bus stop with his bag. I looked at him for the last time, and suddenly something inside me seemed to shrink. These feelings are terrible, but I can't lose him. I rushed down to my parents and blurted out that Charlie and I were in love. There was a pause. I thought they would begin to say that I was crazy and also lock me up in some kind of an asylum. But Dad didn't just say anything. And then suddenly, he hugged me and said that he and my mom had guessed that this could happen. What are you talking about? And then Dad said that they didn't want to talk about it, but it looked like it was time now. My parents adopted me when I was a year old. It turned out that Charlie knew everything, but they asked him not to tell me about it. I was shocked. It turned out that all this time, Charlie was not my brother. But then it dawned on me that this meant that Charlie and I could be together after all. Hooray! I immediately ran out of the house. My parents shouted after me that I would not make it. The bus was about to leave, but I didn't care. For the first time in a long time, I was happy. While I was chasing that vile Dan, my true love was so close. A bus stop was around the corner, and I saw Charlie on the bus. I started to scream, and then Charlie noticed me. He ran out of the bus as fast as he could, and I immediately threw my arms around his neck. We're not siblings. I know, he didn't want to tell you, so as not to hurt you. Charlie gave me a big hug, but the bus gave the signal to leave. Charlie opened his arms. Please don't go away. After all, now we will be together. Despite my tears, Charlie got on the bus. I was amazed. Why was he leaving? But Charlie took his bag from the salon and calmly walked back to me. Actually, I was on my way to the workout, but if this is the case, I can skip one. How? I thought you were going to the clinic. Charlie laughed and said that he settled everything with his father. He gently took my hand and suggested that we take a walk in the park. And I said I wouldn't mind another ride on the Ferris wheel.